Welcome to Radioactive, your local, independent, anti-corporate voice. Produced by members of the Hartford Independent Media Collective, your real alternative news source in Central Connecticut.
Today on Radioactive, we'll speak to Mahbod Seraji, Iranian author of the book Rooftops of Tehran, about the current upheaval in Iran, the U.S. media, and what U.S. politicians and U.S. citizens can do to help the situation.
So we have Dr. Mahbod Seraji. He's the author of Rooftops of Tehran, and could you just start by giving sort of a brief introduction to you, personally and professionally?
Sure. Well, I was born in Iran in 1956, came to the States in 1976 before the Iranian Revolution, and I did all of my studies at the University of Iowa, and started working in corporate America, I guess in 1990, and currently I'm working as a independent management consultant, working around the globe. Mm-hmm. So, I also wrote a book, as you know.
Yes, talk about the book Rooftops of Tehran, and on your website you say that you wrote it to acquaint readers with Iran. What did you mean by that?
Well, in the last 30-some years, there's been such a negative portrayal of Iran and Iranians, and an amazing type of vilification, demonization of Iranians in general, that I wanted to write something that demonstrated that Iranians are not that different from the rest of the world, that we laugh too when we hear something funny, or we cry when it hurts, when we fall in love. Not every single marriage is arranged. That women, we don't make our women chew on rocks, for punishment, things like that, which are pretty much, I think, sort of the perception of the Iranians, across, especially here in the United States. I wanted to write something about those things that are, I think, I call universal: love, friendship, loyalty, that exists in Iran as well as here or anywhere else in the world. So that was really the purpose of writing the book. For
listeners such as myself who have not read the book, take us through the story a little bit. How did you seek to accomplish all these different things in a novel format?
Sure. Well, the story is, some of the reviewers have said it's both a political and a love story. It's the story of a bunch of kids who live in this middle-class neighborhood, and one of them has this secret crush on the girl next door, who happens to be engaged to a friend of his, who's very anti-Shah and is on Shah's Sawaq's hit list. And eventually, this kid, the narrator, unintentionally gives away the location of where this other kid is hiding, and when he's arrested and eventually bad things happen to him, it changes the dynamics of things in that neighborhood, and how this kid feels about himself, about the world around him. He becomes disillusioned about the world in which he's living, the brutality of the Shah's regime, the Sawaq, and all of those kinds of things. And it also sort of tests the limits of his humanity and the humanity of the people around him. So that's what the story is about.
You mentioned you came to the United States first in 1976, before the revolution. Have you been back since at all, or have you been in outside of Iran for that whole time?
No, actually, I've been to Iran many times. I went back once in 1978, right before the revolution, and then I didn't go back until 1993, and then I made frequent visits. I've made frequent visits most of the members of my family are here in the States, but my father was still in Iran until about 8 or 9 months ago. So in the last 18 months, I think I've gone to Iran about 6 times. So I've been there quite often.
Can you comment, before we get into the sort of more particulars about the current situation, in that time period since 76, 79 till today, has there been a movement towards more democratic things and that may have contributed to the current demonstrations that we're seeing?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, I think Iran is perhaps, Iran has more political prisoners per capita than I think any other country in the world. So that movement has always been there. The opposition has always been there. It's just that it was really the regime really treated those individuals harshly. Many of the people in the opposition left the country. Many were arrested. Many have been executed. Many are still in prisons, tortured. Akbar Ganji was here a couple of years ago, and he was in prison for quite a long time. And he has quite a bit of followers, a lot of followers in Iran. There are people like him. There are a lot of people like him, both inside and outside of Iran, and have been there for the last 30 years that this regime has been in power.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the label that Iran is part of the so-called axis of evil under the Bush administration, at least in their rhetoric?
Well, I think that was one of the most unfortunate statements that Bush ever made. Especially the timing of that was incredibly important because President Khatami was in power and he was a reformer. He was part of the reformist movement. And basically by calling Iran as part of the axis of evil, what Bush did was to give the hardliners the excuse they needed to undermine all of Khatami's reforms. Mm-hmm. So that was quite a mistake, and I think, but I'm not sure that was not done on purpose. You see some of the rhetoric coming out of the neocons these days, even. They prefer to have the hardliners in power because then that gives them any excuse they need to do whatever in Iran. Whereas
right.
if you have a reformist government in Iran, that sort of takes that excuse away.
Mm-hmm. If I could jump in, Kevin, what are your feelings on John McCain's statements regarding how President Barack Obama has handled the situation in Iran, given the fact this is the same guy who joked about bomb Iran not too long ago?
Again, I think that these are pretty unfortunate statements he's making, and as usual, his judgment is quite questionable. I remember, I of course remember that song, which again was very, very offensive to many Iranians who lived in Iran and abroad. But I also remember that one time that he was in Wisconsin in that town hall meeting, and that lady stood up and said, I don't trust Barack Obama because he's an Arab. And of course, Iranians are not Arab, but I think that lady probably didn't know that. To her, the Arabs and Persians probably were the same. But what I thought was interesting was McCain's response, which he immediately took the microphone away and said, no, ma'am, he's not an Arab. He's a good family man. And I, for 1 second, I just thought he didn't say that. Did he? Or being Arab or being from the Middle East and being a good family man mutually exclusive? Now, I know he probably didn't mean it that way, but it was a very hurtful statement. Then he added to that, well, he's a good citizen of the United States with whom I have some disagreements. Well, you can be an Arab and a good family man and a good citizen of the United States.